Welcome to Guy Shrink. I'm Bill Roman, host here. And in Guy Shrink, we talk about what keeps a guy awake at night and what makes him wrestle around with his thoughts and come to some new ideas or new solutions to issues. Today, I'm going to interview a really good friend that I've known for a number of years, Nate Walke, who's an entrepreneur here in Toledo, Ohio. And we're at the 3rd Street Cigar Shop in Waterville, Ohio. Kind of a new venue. I thought this would be a great place to just have headquarters at. So we're both having a cigar and talking to each other. And in this conversation, Nate and I are going to talk about ideas. And Nate is probably one of the few people I know in my life who's never been afraid of a new idea. And I would like to just pick his brain on what does it mean, Nate, to not be afraid of a new idea. But first of all, the question I always ask at the beginning is, what keeps you awake at night?
Oh, well, I've had some doozies of some nightmares in my lifetime. So it's funny, when I was a kid, I used to have a recurring nightmare that involved my mom. And this is really scary. I've talked to my sister and Jade about turning this into a short, scary film. But in the dream, I'm probably 7 or 8 years old, and we're at the house, and my mom says, "Hey, I'm going to go to the grocery store." And I said, "Can I stay here by myself?" And she says, "Yeah." So she leaves and goes to the grocery store. A few seconds later, she comes back and says, "Oh, I decided not to go to the grocery store." But in the dream, in my mind, I knew that that wasn't my mom that came back. It was a witch that made herself look just like my mom. So the tension in this dream is so overpowering because I'm acting like I believe this is my mom, but my heart's beating out of my chest. I want to run out of the house. So I say to her, "Okay, can I go outside and play?" And she goes, "Yeah, but don't go out of the yard." So I say, "Okay," and I'm walking from the living room through the kitchen, and I'm trying not to make a break for it, and I look over my shoulder, and she's watching me. And I go outside on the back porch, and I'm just waiting for that moment where I can just take off and run. And I get about halfway out the backyard, and I look up in the window, and there she is looking out the window at me, this witch that looks just like my mom. I'm not doing it justice, but it was so scary, and it affected me as a child, and I had it several times. So as far as what keeps me awake at night, sometimes I fear that dream coming back because it was so powerful. So yeah, I've had my share of nightmares that'll have me, wake up screaming, sweating.
It's interesting. Freud said that dreams are the royal road to the unconscious. And as you're talking about that, I'm just thinking, I wonder what kind of unconscious stuff's going on in Nate's head about the witch that looks like his mother.
Right.
And it recurs. It's
I know.
a recurring
Where did
dream.
that come from?
What's up with that? What's
that
going
age?
on?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, your
Wild.
guardian angel, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe not. It wasn't your guardian angel. Well, Nate, we've known each other for a number of years, and I've always respected you as a person who is not afraid of a new idea. And I know you have cooked up or whatever so many neat things here in the Toledo area. But I'm just intrigued by your ability to not be afraid of a new idea. So how is it that you don't run away from new ideas and you nurture them and they come to fruition in some beautiful ways? So what is there about you that causes you not to run away from ideas?
That's a good question, and I'd probably have to psychoanalyze myself a lot more to really understand where that comes from. I do have a couple of ideas. I think that when I was a child, my experiences shaped me into possibly being that way. For instance, we moved around a lot. I was born in Southern Ohio. We lived outside of West Virginia. I lived outside of Chicago and then the Toledo area. I think I went to 8 or 9 different schools and 12 or 14 different houses within those different cities. And so I found myself always the new kid. So from kindergarten, first grade, third grade, sixth grade, all these pivotal moments, high school, I was moving to a new city, not knowing anybody. And I probably did have a lot of fear, socially with that. Like, am I going to fit in? How am I going to make friends? And then, of course, I'm losing my group of friends that I had prior to that. So I know that affected me in a lot of ways that were, undesirable. I did not want to move every time we moved. And, over the course of my life, though, that may have given me what you touched on, because I had to learn to go into new unknown situations with a lot of uncertainty and try to adapt and try to become, part of that crowd. So that's one of my suspicions, is that, that may have shaped me into giving me courage into going into situations and having to figure out how to navigate that, which I think is a very powerful skill set for anybody to have. If you can go into a situation where there's a lot of uncertainty, and life is really that. I think we block a lot of that out. But whether it's a new business idea or a new job or a new person that you're meeting or a new group of people, I think that we can learn how to adapt to those situations. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I do think that has something to do with it.
Well, I think it answers the question in a big way. You talk about adaptability, and we do know that species that adapt to environmental changes have a good chance of surviving. And those,
survival of the fittest?
Right. Well, I guess it's called natural selection, whatever. But those species that don't adapt, and it doesn't have to be a living thing like a creature or an animal, but it can be an institution, for instance. Institutions that don't adapt to changing markets, for instance, businesses that don't adapt to changing markets go out of business. That's just how it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I ask you, what is there about you not being afraid of a new idea? And it's you have nurtured this ability to adapt to new situations because, so to speak, you had to survive. You had to find a way as a young kid, moving around, on how to survive in a good way. And so you weren't afraid to adapt to new situations.
That's true. And even as a young adult, with your career and college and trying to figure out what you're going to do with your life and relationships, there is that element of survivability to it. I was disconnected from my family. They were very far away. I was by myself, struggling without really any support network. And being in those situations where, you might just need $5 for gas one day to get to work, and that could be catastrophic if you don't have that type of assistance at key times. And so there was a lot that I had to do that came from that survivalist mindset. I know the Marines have a mantra that's improvise, adapt, and overcome. And, it comes from the idea that you could be in enemy territory someday. You're, in a plane crash and you're in the wilderness, and you have to take what you have at hand to not only survive, but try to get back to civilization or to get a foothold back onto what your mission is. And that's something internally that I never would have chosen to go through numerous times. But those situations, I found myself in a lot of situations that society would view undesirable, through no fault of my own. And it was terrible to go through it. But it taught me these things, that were, and I'd like to give some examples. I don't know how personal or detailed to get, but those situations forced me to have to draw upon resources that I had deep inside that I never probably would have executed otherwise. And I think that conditions you, it shapes you in the way that you move and navigate the world and how you look at things. One of my favorite quotes, I think it was from the philosopher Seneca. It said that luck is where preparation meets opportunity. So the preparation part, what is that? Is that going to school? Is that learning? Yeah, but it's also your life experiences. What you go through prepares you. And a lot of times it feels pointless when it's happening. Like, how am I ever going to use this bad situation to do anything? What good's going to come out of that? And I've found that those situations, at a certain time and a certain circumstances will come into your life, and it's like all those things come together. And so the second piece of that quote, that luck is where preparation meets opportunity, being able to identify having your eyes open in a certain respect to events that might previously have just gone unnoticed. But being open, I think, in a survival situation, you're hypersensitive. You're hyper aware of everything around you. Like, oh, this might just be a stick, but can I use that to start a fire or to, fend off an wild animal? Sounds like I was dropped off on a deserted island somewhere. I wasn't.
We know that you were. We know that you were.
Right.
You're an alien kind of thing.
Like Tom Hanks on Castaway.
Yeah, there you go.
Bust my own tooth out with an ice skate. So yeah, there's another example. But being able to see normal everyday situations or information that comes to you and seeing an opportunity and then being able to act on it, it is something that I've noticed that I do have. And it's common. A lot of people have it. But I feel like I don't really have to try to be that way. It's just kind of who I am now. Probably through the conditioning of the life experiences.
It sounds like exactly that you discovered and had more successes under your belt in adaptability that it became who you are.
Feels that way.
The French physician Louis Pasteur, we get pasteurization from him, of course, the discoverer of rabies vaccine, or the inventor, whatever you want to call it, the developer, said chance favors the prepared.
Right in the same line.
Similar to what Seneca said.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And to give some examples of that, I love entrepreneurship. I love startups. I find that whole landscape just incredibly exciting and super fun. And so I have started numerous things over the years. And one of the first businesses that I started was hotcards.com. It's based out of Cleveland. There was a group of us early on that kind of spread that through the Midwest. And, at that time, that was an example of something I tell people often. I started a graphic design company with no computer. Actually had a computer, had to sell it, and a big project at the time project came across my lap, and I didn't have a computer, and I had to go to Kinko's, and it was $60 an hour at the time, $1 a minute, to use their computers and Adobe Photoshop, which was like $2,000 at the time to buy. And I had to design a logo in 10 minutes. I had $10 to my name, so I go into Kinko's, I design this logo. And, that's the essence of bootstrapping. It's using the resources you have at hand to do what you have to do. And, that was a little step that caused, over the next year or two, I was able to, create a living for myself out of the design and then the printing, and then it goes on from there. So my point in saying that is, it was a terrible situation at the time, but that being in those circumstances forced me to have to, basically create my own living from my own skill set.
I just find it amazing and intriguing that same set of circumstances that caused you to say, oh, I got $10, I got 10 minutes, would cause somebody else to say, forget it, I'm screwed, I'm done, it's over with. And what is there about Nate that allows him, or at least puts him in the position of sees this as a challenge to overcome as opposed to an obstacle?
And I remember going through that, Bill. I remember being down to that last $10. And it's like, do I put this in for gas? Do I buy food? Do I try to, pay some part of a bill? And it's like, what is the best use of this right now? What will get me? And there is drive. Obviously, that's a huge motivation to stay alive and have a place to live and take care of your family. So it was probably a lot of necessity. What's that other quote? The necessity is the mother of invention.
Necessity is the mother of invention.
I didn't invent anything, but I invented a creative way,
yes,
to get to that next step.
Yes, yeah. Well, what you're talking about, another author, Ryan Holiday, for instance, who does the Daily Stoic and lots of good stuff on Stoicism, and he's just written a book called "The Obstacle Is the Way," where you see an obstacle as being an invitation to do something creative, as opposed to And that's what I've always found intriguing about you. That's why I see you as one of those few people I know personally not afraid of a new idea. You see it as a way to move forward.
I do, and I gravitate towards that. It's attractive to me. I like that I don't want to say challenge, but the fact that it is something new. There's a curiosity to it. I want to go explore it. I want to have that adventure of finding out, is this something that could be good in a bigger way? That's a huge part of my personality.
Well, I've had some experience with you in some of those startups. Could you say a little bit more about your excitement about entrepreneurial startups? Because I think we're in a place in our culture right now, given the post-COVID thing, and now there's a dearth of workers per se, and instead of seeing it as nobody wants to work anymore, I see us transitioning in our culture to more and more people working for themselves, being more entrepreneurial and trying to do some things on their own. So what is there about that entrepreneurial spirit that's attractive to you?
Well, the first thing I want to say about that is I think the time we live in is absolutely incredible. People talk about this all the time, but I joke how I had all of human history to be born, and I was born right after air conditioning was a thing. And I'm like so thankful for that all the time. I'm just like, oh God, thank you for whatever caused this for you to create me now.
I was born when we didn't have air conditioning. So
okay, right. I heard a statistic when they landed Neil Armstrong on the moon in 1969 that only half of all U.S. households had air conditioning. Does that
that's
sound
probably
right?
true. Absolutely. That was 1969.
I can't even sleep without a fan in the winter now. It's like I'm such a big baby. I need that sound. If anything's off, I can't do it.
As a kid, we had one fan in the house, and it went in my mom and dad's bedroom. That's where it was.
Yep. It's oftentimes they had the one air conditioner in their room too, and they'd shut the door.
That's correct.
But to try to answer your question, I think that technologically, the fact that we're all carrying around these iPhones that are incredible computers. We have access to all of the world's information. I've heard that every book ever written is like transcribed now. You can just push a button and read it.
Didn't know that.
Any information you need, medical, you can go on WebMD or the Cleveland Clinic, or, they're just a wealth, anything you want to find out, in real time. Google, you can literally walk down the streets of Paris with Google Maps. And it's extended our abilities. I've heard that it's made us superhuman, that we are truly cyborgs in the sense of the word, that I have this mechanical computing device that's with me all the time. And it extends my reach. It extends my power, my impact. And I think people might be slow to wake up to that sometimes, like how much they can do. So when you were talking about entrepreneurship and how do I feel about that, there's also, man, I'm just quoting all kinds of things today.
Yeah.
I heard a quote that we are all entrepreneurs. So you think back to the caveman days, and you've got to find food. So you've got to go out and find a skeleton and use that femur bone as a club, and go club a squirrel or a bear or a woolly mammoth for your food. And as civilization progresses and changes, work starts to look different. We had the Bronze Age, the Copper Age, and you have the Industrial Revolution, which was incredible. But that, kind of created what we know as factory life, factory work. And, our generations and my grandparents were born right after that. And there was always something to me, even as a child, hearing about that and seeing images of, you go work on an assembly line or something. Nothing wrong with that. It creates a livelihood for people, which is the big challenge most of us have. Survivability, to be able to eat and to have a place to live. And for me, though, that vision of being in a factory for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, doing a repetitive act, was soul killing.
Yes.
There was to me, there was nothing purposeful about it other than the immediate meeting of a need, which is, a necessity. But I think that view of work, and that extends to, restaurants or even a good corporate job somewhere. You're doing something that somebody else has told you to do. It's their vision and dream sometimes, and you're doing it just for the pay. And, with entrepreneurship, there's this freedom, there's this autonomy that, yes, I'm not guaranteed right off that I'm going to get a paycheck next week, but I can build something and do something that creates value to the world, and people will pay you for that value. And I just became wired in such a way that freedom and that autonomy, for my personality, that was what I needed. That was what I wanted, to be able to test ideas, to not have to spend time explaining it to somebody else. Not that I'm the smartest guy at all, but that slows me down the way that I work, to have to be checked and to double report and micromanaged and things like that. So I do wonder how many people now in modern society with all this technology are realizing, hey, I'm not finding purpose in my job. There's nothing here that excites me. And I think that's a huge draw for people, that our basic needs, in America, a larger percentage of us, that's becoming less and less. And we're able to find other ways to not just make a living, but to build things.
I think you're absolutely right. As you're talking, I'm thinking about intrinsic value, and that entrepreneurship, as you're talking about it allows me to find something that is enjoyable to do, but also I see intrinsic value in what I'm doing. Whereas you said somebody else's agenda working in a factory doesn't have that. I'm thinking of Matthew Crawford. I don't know if you've ever heard of Matthew Crawford. Has written several really interesting books, and he wrote one called Shop Class as Soulcraft. And he talks about his own development. He got a PhD in, I think it was in political theory, University of Chicago. He went through that whole business about, working in a brain, a brain place in Washington D.C., and was cranking out these papers for some innocuous group, and finally came to the realization that what I'm doing is I'm just doing this for somebody else. I don't feel any value in what I'm doing, and he, so to speak, cashed it all in, opened a motorcycle repair shop in Richmond, Virginia, and is thriving and loves it. But it talks about he went to the entrepreneurial route and say, I'm finally done with this. I need something that's going to give me value, and I'm going to create value in what I'm doing. That's what I'm hearing. This entrepreneurial startup stuff that excites you is about something of value for me, but I'm also creating value as well.
Yes, and that's a key thought for me, because, there are businesses that exist that are kind of, just playing the middleman. They're getting a cut of something somewhere, and it's not really actually giving any kind of a valuable service or product. And there's a mantra in the startup world that's been around for a few years that, your company should actually be solving a problem. There should be a real problem that is getting solved. And there are a few reasons for that. And the first is, when people are experiencing a problem at work, whether it's a software thing or even at home or in social life, it causes a pain. And they're looking for relief for that pain. So, a good example would be like Uber, right? We have cars, we have taxis. But a problem was, it wasn't really on demand. If you were out drinking somewhere and didn't have a designated driver, or you needed to get to work one day because your car broke down, it could be very difficult to get a ride. So Uber, well, hey, there's a huge market here for people. Push a button, a car picks you up. And then it also solves a problem on the other end. It created income for people. I don't know how many people work for Uber. And I know Uber has struggled with its business model. Keep that price right for the person to get paid, for them to make something, for building the platform, and then the user to pay. But to me, that's a great example of a real world problem. And then, that disrupted transportation to a large degree. And so I think companies have to think about, what problems exist out there? What are people struggling with? And a lot of times this is uncovered by people who work in a certain industry. They'll be like, wow, I wish this certain thing existed. If I just had this software, or if this program did this thing, it would just make my life so much easier. And when you create something like that, people will pay you for it. And that's how you know that you may have a market for your business, is when people are ready to give you money for this thing that you have. And so I'm all about creating startups and businesses that are also bettering humanity in some way. It doesn't have to be some grand overture like we're going to solve the world's biggest problems of clean water and hunger and all that, although it can be. but something that could improve somebody's life and make them more efficient and more productive. I love working on things that do that. That is fun to me. Even if the business ultimately doesn't succeed, or if they find out that it's not a good idea for some reason, that, it's that idea that the journey is the destination. I think that's incredibly fun. All that goes with that, the branding, the design, the customer validation interviews, the meeting of people, bringing in co-founders. As I say this, I'm really realizing how much of a social person I am. I do love hanging around people and hearing their ideas and the conversations that can happen. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
Sure it does. Sure.
Okay.
Sure. I really like what you said. I'm also thinking, though, I want to solve a real problem. I mean, that's kind of what I want. I want my business solved. But in the solving of a real problem, I'm now going to create a new problem, because in solving a real problem, I might step on some toes that have helped make that problem a problem.
definitely.
And then all of a sudden, now my new problem that I've created is I got to deal with all those people that aren't so happy about me solving this problem.
Yes. So I've thought about writing a book about that topic, actually.
Really?
Yeah. So, over the past 20 years or so, I've started a number of things that have had a significant impact. And there's this phenomenon that I've noticed, that when you enter a new space, or when you do something that's starting, even just to make a small little rumble, there are people that are in that space already who may not be happy about that. And a lot of times they'll pose as friends, or they'll come out, and many times they do end up being friends. But there's a lot of fear, I think, in spaces, and they don't know who you are. Mm-hmm. And so there's a reaction that can happen. Mm-hmm. And it can be very disconcerting. Does that mean what I think it means?
Yes.
A little bit. It'll take you off guard, and there's a little bit of, hey,
Yes.
Why can't we be friends and work on this together?
Yes.
And sometimes you can get past that. Yes. But it's a known phenomenon that definitely exists, and it can be very powerful. People will go to great measures to sabotage and to attack and to, subtly bring things that could have a good impact down for sometimes personal reasons.
Yeah, so that's an operating principle in systems theory philosophy, systems in business to keep itself in business. And then when something comes along that might disrupt that, we have to do something about that disruption.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that's fearful about new ideas, is that it's going to cause something else to happen, not just a neat thing, a good thing, but there's going to be some people that aren't going to be so happy with that new idea, and you're going to get some pushback, which for a lot of people causes them to say, well, that wasn't such a good idea after all.
And I think that you have to, once you're aware that type of competitive, destructive force is out there, I actually kind of enjoy that now. I enjoy facing that, knowing that it's coming, because, again, it might go back to the challenge, but it's motivating to a degree, unless they actually succeed in, wiping out whatever you're trying to do.
Yeah, that does happen, as you know.
Yeah, and, you hear these stories. Like, I think everybody knows that I'm a huge Elon Musk fan. Mm-hmm. The spaces that Elon got into, I would have definitely been naive about it, but, talk about jumping in the tank with some sharks, right? He, working on solar and batteries technology for electric cars, he's basically getting into industries that are the biggest that we have, oil and cars, and multiple billion-dollar companies that have a vested interest in, electric cars not coming to fruition until a certain time. Mm-hmm. Or the same with SpaceX and going to Mars. And I know that, there was a time when Elon, back in the early 2000s, was almost laughed out of existence when he talked about electric cars. The big three automakers derided him as, there's a famous video one time where they call electric cars a cult and say it'll never be a thing. And then fast forward here 15 years, and all three big automakers are manufacturing electric cars. Ford came out with an electric Mustang. And when that was tweeted, somebody said something to Elon like, hey, what do you think of this? And he was like, wow. He said, I'm really happy. Tesla's mission was to accelerate the world's adoption of renewable energy. So what they probably thought was, oh, these guys beat him to the punch. But it's amazing that Elon Musk was able to have the dent that he has, in that space now. But you hear about, there are countries that have wanted to assassinate him. I mean, this man is leading the way technologically, and I believe, and this is hugely controversial on Facebook, there are tons of people posting about, another billionaire sending himself to space. What an ego trip. Why don't you use that money to, solve problems here on the earth? Absolutely, those core ideas and questions are good, but that does not apply to Elon Musk. Elon Musk is not going to space to, satisfy his ego. I mean, there may be a part of that. We're all human beings. We all have a psychology, and who wouldn't feel great to do something so grand? But when you look at his reasons for doing it, and I don't want to get into all that here and make this whole talk about Elon Musk, but, he wants to make humanity a multi-planetary species. And here we have the ability to go to the moon and to Mars, and the Earth is a single point of failure. If a meteor or an extinction event happens here, or a plague or a disease, it only makes sense to me that we would do that, and then what other scientific discoveries, we think, there's nothing there, it's just a big rock. No, we shouldn't say that. We don't know what we're going to discover in the journey of doing this.
That's right.
We discovered penicillin from a fungus. Some people would have just thought, that's garbage, we don't need that.
Yes.
Somebody studied that, and now it's, increased our...
Yeah, well, same with Velcro and Post-it notes and all those kinds of things. They were all accidental.
How did Velcro form? I've heard this. I forgot.
I don't remember.
Okay.
Accidental discoveries. So just think of all the things that NASA did to get
Viagra.
people.
That was supposed to be like a heart blood clot medicine, I think. They were like,
I have no idea. Else. I have no idea what you're talking about. Those little blue pills saved the world, right?
Right. Yeah. So
you did say something about Elon. I think it's worth talking about a little bit more. It was his ability to transcend the trap of. So what do you think about the big three? Outdoing you. And his response was, I'm just glad that Tesla was able to make a dent at the fact that they would even entertain doing it, as opposed to, they screwed us. And he didn't bite that. He didn't bite that hook, and instead commended, hey, our company did what it should have done. It furthered the cause of electric automobiles.
And I think that's because he truly is mission focused.
Yeah.
Or vision focused. If you focus on your vision, what you want that to be for your company, and it's not making money. The vision has to be something more purposeful. Making money is a byproduct of being able to actually actualize a vision. I think that. And I think that's why he's been so successful, why he can do so many things. People are amazed. How are you running all these companies? How do you have enough time in the day? I think he's in a zone of almost superhuman performance, where he's capitalizing on every technology. Everything's maximally efficient. He knows where this Pareto's law that 80% of your results come from 20% of your actions.
Yes.
I think that if a person can learn to identify that, they know where to spend their time. When to take leisure, when to be social, and when what's going to have the maximum impact. What one act can I do? And he's doing it, and it doesn't surprise me that it's super controversial. Why would everybody love that? But when you look at leaders in the world, we've got political leaders, we've got celebrities, we've got teachers, there's millions of unknown people who are leading in different, incredibly valuable and necessary ways. But as far as a public figure goes, I'm totally on board with most of everything that he's doing. The way that he operates, he builds businesses to fund his other businesses. So for instance, Starlink, people talk about, why don't you do something to help humanity? He's literally going to launch 30,000 satellites. I think I don't know how many are in the air right now, but he's already started. He's giving internet access to the entire world. Are you kidding me? There's like 7 or 8 billion people in the world. I think might be 1 billion or 2 billion now have internet access. And they'll take these old, flip phones, give them to third world countries. I've heard stories of, a boy in Africa that was able to get on the internet and figure out how to dig a water well or something, something that basically provided life to that village just by having internet access. There was another boy that would ride like 5 miles a night on his bike to charge everybody's phones, and he would, trade or make money from that. It just improves the lives of everyone. And I'm thinking, this is incredible. This is gonna, give access to the world in remote areas. All of the world's information. And, I don't know why I'm defending Elon. So I think there's been so much hate.
Yeah.
And by people who don't know the whole story. They don't know how he got to where he is now, all the benevolent acts that he's doing. I mean, there was a hurricane in Puerto Rico a couple years ago, and the government couldn't move fast enough to help these people. And he donated a battery array to give power to this island country from the sun, and when I hear people slander him as just a rich, selfish, greedy billionaire putting himself into space, I'm like, you have no idea what's going on. So anyway, I could go on and on about that, but
That's one of those things that keeps you awake at night.
it does keep me awake at night. And he's been a huge inspiration to me. I think that he does dream in grand visions, and I think that humanity needs that. We shouldn't always make just short-term achievable goals. We need something, science fiction, all the things that we have now in this modern century, jets, rockets, phones that literally stream movies over the air. Are you kidding me? At one time, that was just science fiction. People wrote about that. Look at Star Trek. Look at, they say that the iPad, you can almost see it. Or a Zoom call or Skype. They looked up at this big screen, on their spaceship. And all that envisioning and all that acting and all that storytelling was a precursor to getting the actual reality of that technology here. And they knew about it back then. We had computer chips and, we had, I heard that Apple had patents for the iPhone back in the 90s, right? And like when that came out in 2007, the head of Microsoft thought it was useless. They were like, who wants something like this? Like even the people that are at the top of an industry, sometimes they can't see.
Well, that's what Kodak happened. That's what happened to Kodak. They didn't. They didn't see the future of filmless cameras, even though they'd already produced them.
You're right, because they should have been leading that industry.
They're the ones. And where's Kodak at now? It's not around.
Or the famous Blockbuster Netflix story. Blockbuster was positioned to become what Netflix is, and then
the obstacle becomes the obstacle. That's the problem. Instead of becoming the way. Not afraid of a new idea.
The obstacle becomes the obstacle, right? It just becomes everything in your mind. No way around it. Yep.
So what else is on your mind? What else keeps you awake at night?
Oh, tons of things. I mean, I've been doing a lot of self-analyzation, in my own psychology. And
so how's that working for you?
It's funny because I keep hitting this mic. I don't know if it's going to make sounds.
That's what our engineer will figure that out.
Right. So there are things like even with my daughter that, she's 22 now.
That'll keep you awake at night.
Yeah. Well, not those things. I try not to think about certain things, but, I hope that as she was growing up, there are things I've been able to articulate in my mind that I wish I would have had a clearer vision of. Like, for instance, to kind of answer your question on where some of this can come from and how I think this could actually help other people in an entrepreneurial sense or even in life, and talking with Jade about it, a lot of it has to do with your mindset and your confidence, right? And these are things that I heard as a kid and in school that sounded cliche. Nobody really explained them to me. I'm understanding them at a depth that I didn't before. So, I was the idea with my daughter that I specifically wished that I would have consciously known more. And I think we did this to some degree. It was, where does confidence come from? Internal confidence, where you feel good and that you can do things and that you're not afraid. And that's always going to be there in some respect. But I figured out that for me, confidence comes from, let's say you have a fear about something, like going to a new school, or meeting somebody new or talking to a stranger. If you face that fear and you do that thing, and then you don't die at the end, even if it goes badly, or better yet, if you have a good outcome, if you make a friend or somebody talks to you and they don't hate you and ignore you, those little wins, actually, you experienced it yourself. It told you.
That's correct. Right.
You know, and then
Right.
you get confidence. So whether it's something at school or.
Right. Yeah, it's through experience that we get confidence.
Yeah. And so
Definitely.
I wish I could have created more controlled experiences, you know, that my daughter went through to try to allow her to face those things and then build that confidence. Because you could tell somebody all day, hey, you're amazing, you do this and that. But when they know it for themselves by doing it, it becomes a part of you. And I was talking with my sister about this the other day too, because, you know, I think part of my psychology, I don't know where this came from. It's probably common. But I felt from a child that I wasn't as good as other people, you know, that other people were better than me, or that they were more valuable, or they were smarter, or they, you know, better athletes, or more attractive, whatever it may be. Maybe that's what an inferiority complex is. I don't know. But somehow along the way, you know, I had this mindset. Maybe it comes from moving around and having to go to new schools and all that. But what really helped me was to understand that, you know, when I'm in this mindset of other people are better and I've got to prove myself to them, I've got to win them over. I've got to show them that I'm a good person and that I'm likable and I can be a friend and I have value. What kind of pulled me out of that mindset, which can be destructive, was this idea of confidence being the idea that no matter what happens, I'm going to be okay.
Yes. Yes.
So if I go into a situation and I go to a new school and these kids laugh at me and hate me and don't invite me in, which did happen but wasn't normal. It was an exaggerated fear. Even when those bad things happen, I'm like, I'm still Nate Walke. You know, I know who I am on some level. And the critiques or the interpretation that I would get from that were down on myself and made me feel not good, I was able to fight against that and rationalize against that and say, you know what, that's not true. There's other explanations for this, why people would behave this way. And I think that if someone can internalize that through experience or reading or whatever mechanism, that truly is the single most powerful thing. I don't even know if I should call it confidence. It's a mindset of knowing and understanding that, you know, I'm empowered. I'm empowered because of knowing who I am and what I've experienced and what I've been able to do, that even though I'm not flawless and even though I'm not perfect, I'm able to go out there and make an impact and learn in spite of these other forces that come against you.
Yeah. And Nate, it's been great talking with you about this. As always, I always enjoy having coffee and cigars with you. And I'm just wondering, to kind of wrap things up, if you got maybe a one-liner bit of advice, so to speak, for guys that are wrestling around with stuff in their heads at night, what would it be?
Well, I'd say a thought that's been coming to me recently is just how much time we spend worried about the future, thinking about the future and causing ourselves anxiety and fear, or reminiscing on the past and replaying scenarios and becoming depressed or getting sad or regretful. And we miss the moment that we're living in, you know? Like right now, I just think I'm sitting in a very cushy chair with a microphone talking to two great friends. And, I could be in a lot worse situations right now. So I've been trying to train myself to focus on the moment, enjoy the moment. And maybe that's a bit of advice that might help somebody right now. Like, sounds kind of Zen, doesn't it? I don't even know what Zen is, but I tie it into that concept. So
Yes.
I've been on the internet a lot.
Well, it's been great. It's been great talking to Nate Walke, good friend. Thanks for being on Guy Shrink here with Jordan Valdivia, my compatriot, partner in crime, and our engineer and producer. And we're at the 3rd Street Cigar Shop in Waterville, Ohio. taking in the ambiance and having a couple of smokes and just being good friends. So thanks a lot for being here, and we'll get you back on again because I'd like to explore a little bit more about being the dad of a 20-year-old and how that keeps you awake at night. All right?
That sounds good. Well,
Thanks
thank
a
you,
lot.
Bill, for having me.
Yeah, thanks.